Just to warn you before we start, I will have a Menti poll within the first 2 slides, so have your phones ready. Rather than waiting for you to get your phones out while I've got the slide up. You can get them ready now. Okay, also up the back and up here and around the place, we have some sign-up forms if you want to be on the AI Competency Centre's mailing list, if you want all of our exciting news that comes out when it comes out. So you can sign up for these. There's some at the back as well. Okay. All right. In that case, we'll get started. So thank you everyone for coming. My name's Kelly Webb-Davies. I am a AI consultant at the AI Competency Centre, and I specialize in education. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself a bit further into the presentation. So I'm not going to do the introduction with all my background up front because it will become more relevant later on. But what we are going to do first is that poll. Let me just flick across to it. Present. What I want to know is which of these tasks do you use Gen AI for the most? And you can choose 3. So the 3 you use the most. So you can either go to menti.com and use the code, which is 64438642, or you can scan the QR code there. We'll see how many people we get in. 3 people logged in. So your options are summarizing, finding answers to questions, coding, rewording text to translation, data analysis, how-to advice, image generation, searching the web, planning a task, writing feedback. There are many other uses for generative AI, I'm aware, but I kind of just tried to choose the most common ones. All right. Oh, very evenly split. It's going to make my job harder for the point I want to make. 5 out of 12, 6 out of 12. All right, if everyone's logged in, I might get rid of that QR code so it's not in the way of my nice little pie chart. Oh, very evenly split. That's interesting. We're waiting for 2 more people. Oh, we're getting the last people going. I'm going to have a look. So what have we got? We've got the most common is finding answers to questions. Okay, 8 people. The next most common is summarizing. That's one of the ones I'm interested in. And what else have we got? We've got 4 people for writing feedback. So that's 10 here. 5 for rewording or text to translation. So I'm interested in these ones, summarizing, writing feedback, and rewording text translation, because these are language tasks that you're using it for. And this is the reason why I called the presentation Leveraging Language. Hopefully you're noticing the word there, leveraging. It's one of those ChatGPT words. I didn't use ChatGPT to come up with this title, but I chose that word specifically because I knew it was a ChatGPT, one of those tells for people using ChatGPT. But this is what I wanted to look at. So people are using it for language work, which makes sense because these are large language models. And so I want to make the point even further. What is everyone actually doing with generative AI? Some people are using it to get information. That's quite a common use case as well, especially a lot of students I find doing that, using it to ask questions or get information. But I'll go through a number of different charts here. So this one's from OpenAI of I think it's like 1 million chats with, and this is for work-related purposes. And you see right up the top here, writing is by far the most common use. And if we go to another one from OpenAI, the pink one again, this is all writing, and it's all doing writing for work-related messages. So everyone using ChatGPT for writing the most. Oh, they've got asking. Asking is the next most common as well, but writing language tasks is what people are using it for. This is from a HEPI survey of students. I can't remember how many it was thousands of students, a lot of them. And you can see most of the top uses are enhancing and editing your writing, so using it for writing, but that includes Grammarly, which does include AI, but also generative AI. Summarizing is a language task. You're taking information, you're changing the structure of that information. Note-taking, again, another language task. You're taking information from someone and writing it down. Translation or language support, another language task. Speech-to-text transcription. You're taking speech, you're putting it into a written form. So it's all language work use cases that people are using it for. Even the top one, generating text. I didn't highlight that one because it might not be. That might be finding information, but that could also be language work. And this was just another one I found in a on a website, another study. So you can see seeking information here is top, but you've got a writing use case here, a writing use case there. I'm going to get a laser pointer. There we go. Writing use case here, writing use case here, writing again. What are they? Edit or critique, personal writing or comms, translation, and here you've got another one, argument, summary generation. So my point is language assistance dominates generative AI, despite all the anxiety about over-reliance and reduction in critical thinking. So people are really worried. Students are going to use this for their writing. They're going to rely on it too much because if they're using it for their writing, then they're not thinking. This is the big worry that we are all trying to grapple with, especially in education. But what if we're worrying about the wrong thing? What if it's not as much as a problem as we think? Basically, I'm going to spend this talk trying to convince you that large language models belong in writing. That is where we should be using them. We should be using them for language work. So let's see if I can convince you. The real issue with education for a long, long time, so this is pre-ChatGPT, so this is, I think, problems that we're dealing with, which we have been around for a long time, but we haven't had to face, but now we have to face it because there's a machine that can produce language. We have been conflating linguistic expression with intelligence, and this is everyone, society-wide. I think everyone's aware that you get judged on your language. Put your hands up if you've seen online someone get mocked because they've used the wrong version of there, or there. Yeah, everyone. Because everyone goes, oh, you sound like an idiot because you sound uneducated because you've done that. The person might know what they're trying to say, they've just misspelled something, but everyone judges them just on that little use case, and everyone is aware that they get judged on their language like that. So we worry about the cognitive offloading because we're using the type of language that people produce as a proxy for their thinking skills. So we think if you write in a certain way, then you sound educated, you sound intelligent. But I think maybe we need to rethink that. This is something I come across a lot in the generative AI and education spaces. We're really worried about students using it with writing because writing is thinking. Hear this all the time. Writing is thinking. Writing is thinking. I have my issues with this phrase. I find it has shades of ableism in it because not everyone uses writing for their thinking. I would say instead that writing is technology. It's a representation of language. It's not saying it doesn't help. It can help thinking, sure, but it's not the only way that people can think. I would say that thinking is multimodal. You can do thinking in your head without any external representation of it. You can speak to do your thinking. You can sign to do your thinking. Everyone has language. And if you think about the rate at which people have been literate for all of human history, it's only been 150 years since the majority, not even the majority population, have been literate. Before that, most of the population were not literate, but everyone still had language. Doesn't mean they were insightful, intelligent people that could learn things. People still learn things before they had writing. But writing was a technology that allowed people to maybe do that in different ways. And academic practice can be formed with the other modes. So be performed with other modes. So one thing I like to think about is things that are not like Western ideas. So there are indigenous communities in Australia with no writing systems at all, but they have very complicated, detailed, nuanced knowledge about their local environments because they have to have survived 60,000 years there, and they have an oral knowledge transfer of this information. So, very intelligent people, no writing system, but they still know a lot of things. And academic practice also can be done with speaking. Like, why would we have lectures if we weren't, students going to lectures, hearing someone talk about something? They're learning, I assume, they're listening. So we do both. People have debates, they talk, and they explain things. You can be critical, you can give arguments, you can make your points through speech and signing as well. So it's not just writing. Writing can help thinking, but it's just one of the ways that it can help thinking. So if we think about generative AI, where does it belong? I think this is something that we have to decide in education. So it's sophisticated language technology, LLMs, a large language model. This is kind of the brain, the model behind when you're using ChatGPT. You're using ChatGPT and you're talking to it, it's giving you language back. This is coming from the LLM. It's a large language model. So it is producing language in some form in a certain way. And I think that's where it belongs. So if we're talking about cognitive offloading, this is where we as educators have to decide where it belongs. So if we think people are going to use it to cognitive offload something. This is what we use just about all AI for. If we use your sat nav, you're cognitively offloading where to how to remember where you're going with your maps. If you're if you're using YouTube, the algorithm is deciding for you what you want to watch next, so you're not making those decisions yourself. And so we got to think where that fits. And for me, language is where this fits, and I'll tell you why, how this fits in. So if we're using it for language, not ideas. So what I'm proposing is you separate those things. Separate those things because the language you use to represent an idea isn't necessarily the idea itself. It can be represented in different ways. So think about ideas not equaling expression. They're not completely divorced, but they're also not exactly the same thing. So your thinking, your information, your judgment, your argument can be done in all different sorts of language or different modes of language as well. And your expression of those ideas is more, I would say, like the vocabulary, the grammar, the register, the structure, all these decisions we make about language when we're representing our ideas. So to give you a sort of visual representation of this, I think of like the core ideas. These are yours. These are in your mind. You have these ideas, you have your opinions, you have your arguments. They exist in your mind. You know them. You want to express those somehow. So you have to get those out of you usually in language, maybe through image. So someone else can understand them, what your ideas and your arguments are. And you're getting those to another person, to your audience. And the context of that audience is what affects what type of expression you choose to express your ideas. So that might be a lay audience, so you want to use more simple language. Might be an academic audience, so you use more academic language. They might be children, so you change it again. So the expression is changeable. It could be French versus English. So there are all different ways to represent these ideas, but the core ideas themselves mostly remain the same. They change a bit with language. I'm not saying they don't at all. But so how do you? It could be speaking. You could be speaking to an audience like I am now. So these same ideas that I'm talking about now are ideas I've written about before, but I have an audience here. I'm not going to put it up in writing on the board for you to read. I'm going to speak to you. It's more engaging. Or I could do it in writing, and I might use AI assistants in my writing as well to help me get those ideas. But I want those ideas to come from me, and I want the AI to assist me with the language that I'm using to express them. So my thesis is you should keep the core, keep that idea core, should be yours, but outsource the code you're using to communicate that with someone. And not completely. It's not like you have to do this. I'm not recommending all of the ideas should be going through AI, just that it can be an assistance, especially for certain types of people. But how? So it's a nice idea, but what does it mean in practice? And how can we do it fairly as well? So I'll give you a bit of theoretical background, just a bit of linguistics background, which is I come at this from a linguistics point of view. Again, I'm going to talk about my background in a little bit, but I think of this as translanguaging. So who here has heard of translanguaging before? A couple of people. So translanguaging is this idea that people who are multilingual don't, with the traditional view of this, especially in education, might be you have your English language, you have your other language, whatever it is, then they're in separate boxes and you use them separately. So in education, you might have English medium education, that all happens in English, or you don't bring in the other language. But that's not how multilingual people work. How multilingual people work is they use their full repertoire of language, both of them, all the different ways they can language to create meaning and to communicate that meaning. I feel like I'm getting fun words for my presentation. But like I said, education usually restricts people to particular, and these are prestige forms of language and expression. This is very well researched in the linguistics literature. So there's I'm aware of research that has been done on Ofsted and the way that they represent standard language in their reviews of schools. The issue with this is that it privileges some people over others. So if we're saying in education, you have to use standard English, you have to represent your ideas that way because this is the way that's good English, that is clear communication. Then if you're someone who is born into a family whose language happens to be like that already, you have less of a linguistic distance to cross to get to these prestige areas like science, academia, business, where that type of language is expected. If you're someone whose language is either a stigmatized variety of English, like maybe African American English or maybe Indian English, you have to change that language to be able to get into those places, and you have to learn that. And maybe your first language isn't even English, so you've got even greater distance to cross. The closer your language is to English, so maybe it's Dutch, you're more likely to do conference presentations, you're more likely to get your work published in academic journals. But if you're further away from English, say you speak Japanese, you have much more of a distance to cross, because English is the lingua franca for these areas, and so, you know, people who speak English are more privileged than other people in the world. I extended this, so this is my sort of contribution to this idea, is that digital assistance, digital language assistance applies to this. So I've thought about this as digital translanguaging. So you've got translanguaging, people use all of the tools that are available to them in their repertoire to create meaning. And so digital language tools are something that people use to assist them. So we've had this for a long time. We have spell check, people use spell check. We have speech to text for people who have barriers to writing. There are a lot of different digital language tools. Just now we have a very, very powerful one. So I think of people thinking in maybe any register or mode, doing that kind of the intellectual work of developing their arguments. Maybe they don't have to do that in standard language, in a privileged language. But then they can develop their ideas like that, and then get some digital assistants to help them communicate those ideas that they've already developed. So now I get to a bit about my background. So I came to this view because my academic background is linguistics. So already you go into Linguistics 101 your first week, and the first thing they tell you is all languages, all varieties of language are equally as legitimate, equally as able to be descriptive. And so you need to kind of unlearn the 12 years of schooling that you've done, which is saying this is good language, this is correct English. You have to kind of forget all of that and rethink it. So already I had that in mind. Previous to this, my previous job was teaching academic English to international students. And this was something that really I found sometimes I struggled with, because I had students who were from Nigeria, students who were from India, and their first language was English. But they had to come and pay extra money to do these courses because it wasn't the right type of English to be able to go and do their masters the way they're expected to do their language. And also, I come at this from a sort of social justice and minority language. So again, Nigeria, India, colonized countries, English was kind of imposed upon them, and yet still it's not the right type of English to be able to come and benefit from the education they're trying to get from the UK, because there's status in getting a UK degree from a UK institution. And also minority language. So my second language is Welsh. I've lived in Wales for about 15 years. Welsh is my second language. So I'm very aware of the need for representation of minority languages in places which are prestige, like education, like formal environments. If other languages aren't represented, then they don't have the status that languages like English do. But also, when I was teaching my students, I started to think about this before ChatGPT was released, because I was already interested in it, because my students had started to use Grammarly already. I was getting these essays handed in that were better than I expected the students should be based on what they did in class, but there were still weird mistakes in there I wouldn't expect them to make. And eventually one student said to me, "Oh, all the other students are using Grammarly, like, should I be doing that too?" And I thought, oh yeah, that's what's going on, of course. But they were also using things like Quillbot for paraphrasing, and machine translation. Google Translate's been around forever, for a long time. So the students use that technology. We tell them, no, you're not supposed to, because then you're not learning. But I kind of was rethinking this already, thinking, well, is it fair that they get a bit of assistance from these tools? I kind of think it is, because it's helping them to express themselves. Doesn't mean because they're unable to do it in English, or at least academic English, they're not intelligent. They have language. They come to us with language, with ideas. If they get some help to express them, I thought, yeah, that's cool. But no one's teaching them how to do that. No one's teaching them how to use those tools well, because usually a lot of the time their teachers are native English speakers, and we haven't had to use those tools, so we don't know how to use them appropriately and well. So I was already thinking about this. And then ChatGPT dropped, and I thought, oh, well, there's a machine that can do all of the things that my students were using these different tools for and more. And it's trained on trillions of examples of standard English, especially. It's very good at that. Academic English. What am I teaching my students now? What am I going to do? But also, not just my teaching background. It's not just theory, because it's relevant to me as well. This is how I work. It's affected me, and I've changed my writing process because of the availability of generative AI. So my experience is I have ADHD, and academic writing is just frustrating for me. Think I went through most of my degree, undergraduate degree, half a PhD, which I didn't finish, which I didn't realize was due to executive dysfunction, but now I know why. And everyone tells you writing was meant to be hard, not realizing that actually maybe it's a bit harder for me than for other people until you start talking about it. It's a barrier to my best ideas. If I have all these ideas, ADHD, my mind goes a million miles an hour, they're all there. But if I try and write them down academically, they're just gone like that. So my preferred mode of developing my ideas is speaking. And I have the ideas, I can express them, I can speak about them. I like to tell the story that I flunked out of my PhD. I don't have any written publications to my name, but yeah, I find myself in a PhD level role, and all of my work is done like this through speaking to people. And at least some people seem to value my ideas. This is why I'm here. So I have them. It's just writing is difficult for me. So one way I thought about this recently, I come up with this analogy to try and explain to people what it feels like, is that when I'm thinking all of my ideas, it's like juggling marbles. They're like small, they're heavy, but you have to juggle them fast. And if I'm speaking, I can keep up with that rate of thought mostly, and I can move from one to the other, and I can flit about, and I can keep them up in the air. People can keep up with me mostly, although I do get comments about my speaking is too fast. But if I'm writing, it feels like I've got weights on my wrists. So I'm still trying to keep up with how fast I need to go, but I'll drop a marble, it'll go. I'll lose that idea, I won't see it again. It'll roll under the furniture, and I'll drop another one, it'll go. So although I'm trying to keep up while I'm writing, I know that there's an idea there, and I'll lose it because I'm focusing so hard on the expression of that idea to make it sound academic that the ideas are gone, and I want to keep those ideas. So I have seen this, I came across on LinkedIn, which is this idea of using AI in writing like an AI sandwich, which is step one, use AI to ideate, brainstorm. Step two, write your draft, because people think that's where the thinking happens, I guess, when you're writing your draft. And then step three, get some AI feedback, act as a reviewer. For me, the issue with this is it puts AI at the center of the thinking, which is the first step, getting the ideas. I want the ideas to come from me. I think that's the intellectual process. And that's where I want it the ideas to be happening. And this also, I think, reflects a lot of the university guidance that I see, which is, okay, students will let you use generative AI in your brainstorming and get some ideas, but then you have to do all the writing yourself. I think that's the wrong way around. I think we want students to be developing their cognitive skills, the intellectual process, the argumentation, the reading, the evidencing, the synthesizing. All of that is the stuff that's tough to do with your mind. You want to be exercising your mind to do that. If you get all of that together and then you get a bit of AI help with the phrasing of it, that seems to me like a better cognitive offload than creating the ideas in the first place. So my new writing workflow now, the way I get my ideas together, is that I have them, they're in my mind. I like to speak them because that works best with the speed of the rate of my thoughts. I will use ChatGPT. Sometimes I'll upload like a transcript from a talk I've done in the past, or multiple talks. Transcripts, although they're messy language because spoken language doesn't transfer all that well to written language, it's still information, and ChatGPT can deal with that really well. So I'll upload that, or I'll hit the dictate button on ChatGPT, and I'll just word vomit all my ideas into it. Still my ideas, still my information. And then I will get AI to do the first draft of whatever I want. And then I'll go through it and I'll check and I'll see whether it says what I want it to say. And then I'll post edit it. So then it matches my voice. I make sure it's accurate. This is still my responsibility. It's still something I'm handing in. So, I'm still responsible for the information that I'm putting up. But my idea core stays intact. This is my ideas. I'm just getting some help to express them. And I think of it more like this. Than the sandwich, I think of it as a sculptor's apprentice. So you're a sculptor, you have an idea, you have a vision for what you want to create, you make a plan, you make sketches, and then you get the big block of marble and you send it off to your apprentice just to rough out the form, that grunt work, just to get something that you can then work on. They send it back, and then you work on the details. Make sure it expresses what you want it to express. It matches your vision. This is the process that I'm thinking of rather than the sandwich. So why is this better? Why does it work? I think it works really well because people are worried about hallucinations with generative AI. But if you already know the facts, it's already your information. So if you get ChatGPT or an LLM to generate text, you don't know whether it was right or not unless you go. You have to do the hard work of going to check it against some other source. You don't have to do that if it's already your ideas because you already know whether they're correct or not because you've thought about it. So you can just read through and go, has it changed anything I don't want it to say? Cool. Yes. No. A lower plagiarism risk. If you're getting it just to generate text based on a very simple prompt or a very general idea, it could be taking that from somewhere that already exists and you don't know if it's not telling you the source where it's from. So there's a chance it could be matching from that. If it's the idea that's already yours and you're getting it just to change the language, very, very low. For one thing, it's already your intellectual property, but it's very statistically unlikely someone's had exactly the same idea in exactly the same language. This is why we use Turnitin to do, language matching, not the AI detection one, but the language matching. Because statistically, it's very unlikely people are going to say things the same way ever. And you have clear roles as well. So the ideas come from the human. AI just helps you with the form. So how does this work in the classroom? I have some ideas about that. How do we teach it? I'm going to show you some of the examples that I did in my teaching before this job. When I was teaching academic English, I basically integrated generative AI straight away because I thought, should I tell my students about this? And then I thought, well, if I don't, they're just going to talk amongst themselves, and I'd rather someone who can give them guidance to guide them with it. But I found ways to do it. So the first way was that I used it to create some classroom materials to affirm my students' identities. So I brought their languages into the classroom. I had a list of vocabulary that I wanted them to learn, and I wanted to show them that you can break words down into parts and work out what bits mean just by looking at it, and to show them that I could do that with their language just by looking at the different parts of the words. So I had students in my class who spoke Nepali, who spoke Hindi, Farsi, Yoruba, Igbo, Edo, which is a minority language in Nigeria, and I had Welsh there as well for myself, just for the fun of it. And so I could show the students. So I was like, Nepalese students, just by looking at this, I'm going to assume that the word bashi means language because it's common with those words. I can see it's in all of those ones, and we had a good time sort of going through this, and it brought them all in. And so to create this in by myself without the help of AI, it would have probably taken me 3 days or something to go through and make sure it was all correct. Took me about 30 seconds with ChatGPT. Celebrating my students' linguistic diversity, bringing it into the classroom, making sure there was representation. We could look at that word structure. It was all in one place, all in a nice, neat table. And that minority language was included as well. So this student who spoke Edo, we were doing a task with Google Translate, and he couldn't be included in it. So they were writing in their first language and then translating it to English, and we were going to review, what it did. He said, "Oh, I can't do this because my language is not in Google Translate." And I was like, "Oh, that kind of sucks, doesn't it?" And I was like, "Well, let's try ChatGPT. Let's see how it goes." So we did that just for the hell of it, and it was fine. It worked. So there is this issue. People will bring up some of the downsides of ChatGPT being the bias, being the accessibility, but actually, in some ways, because it's such good language technology, although it's better at standard English, it's also better than previous technologies at other languages, minority languages. And then the other thing I thought, this is another example. I thought, so students are going to interact with this. It'll interact with them back. They're typing something to it. It's going to give them language back. It's likely going to give them standard English because that's what it's trained on and that's what it's really good at. But doesn't that then just give them a language exemplar? Whenever they're interacting with it, they're still reading stuff. They're still writing stuff. They're still interacting with language, even when they're working with ChatGPT. So I did a task where they would write in their current English. So I'm not going to say like, incorrect English. I think usually in linguistics we would call it emergent English. So they're still learning. Whatever English capability they have, they would write in that. Then ask ChatGPT to write this as an academic English. This is something that I think students are doing. This is something that I think people are doing, not just students. This is, we saw at the start, people are using this for rephrasing, for helping them with writing. But what we don't want is the students to just stop there and accept it. So I thought, in the past, I might have textbooks with examples of academic language for them to dissect and to think about. But now I've got this machine that could just create it for them, but not only create it for them, but create it based on their own ideas. So it's even more personalized. The students then would analyze and post-edit it. So we've got one here. From such machine learning, we can get information about different castes, languages, religions, in the same way linguistic problems we face. This is the original text. This is an Indian student. This is why castes are mentioned. And then it rephrased it. And this is this is probably ChatGPT 3.5, I think. So this is an older version. The academic rewriting isn't always great. But we didn't stop there. So I said to the students, all right, now I want you to compare them. The vocabulary, what's different with the vocabulary? Sometimes when we change words, you really didn't need to change, and it made things worse because then it was too academic. But without guiding the students on that analysis, they wouldn't know, what the difference is. If no one's guiding them, no one's telling them, they're just going to put it in, get the output, hand that in. Of course, they're going to do that. But by teaching them to use this as a learning opportunity, they can analyze it. The grammar, what changed? How have things changed around? Why might that have happened? You have to know about normalization when you're thinking about academic English because it happens a lot. Did that happen? Did the flow improve, change? Did the length? So often, like the ChatGPT version was more concise. So being concise is something we try and teach them, and they could examine how that happened. And then by looking at how it's happened, they can then practice that themselves. Did AI miss or change your point? So this didn't happen very often. LLMs are very good at keeping the meaning the same but changing the form. But it did happen in this case. So it says castes. It's changed it to cultures. So I said to that student, is that the same thing? And they said no. So you have to be careful. You have to know when you're reading that output, whether you have to have enough knowledge when you're reading the output, whether it says what you're trying to express. So it's not like use AI for your language work, therefore you don't need to learn academic English more. You do. It's a little bit easier for you, but you still need to know, what's coming out of it and to be able to evaluate the output. And then also, where will you rewrite it? There's that post-editing stage. You still have to do that. You still have to include your voice. So again, this is the same graph from earlier. This is a slide which is from some training that we're developing for students. And this is the type of thing that I'm trying to inform students about. So very common use case, using it for summarizing, using it for translation for language work. Fine, makes life a bit easier. But I want students to critically examine what they're doing when they are doing that. And so then I have this slide. I'm like, so why would you even bother reading the originals anymore if you can get like a short version and you get like the information? Well, because summaries are decisions. So when I teach students to write summaries, I say to them, you have to choose the most important information from what you're reading and represent that in the summary. If it's a short summary, you need the most important information. If it's a bit longer, you choose the next most important thing. If you're getting AI to write a summary for you, it's making the decisions about what is the important information. And that might miss things. You might disagree if you went back and read the originals of what it was. And translations are interpretations. So they still need some linguistic knowledge. Might still be the author's ideas, but you might lose some nuance. You might lose some of the precision. Maybe there's certain phrasing in it that really matters that the AI has decontextualized and has made an error with. So I want them to ask themselves, what decisions is the chatbot making that you're not making instead? You need to be doing that intellectual work of making decisions, of connecting information. How do you know what is missed if you don't read the original or misrepresented? And what are the stakes of your task? If you're handing something in as an assignment and you're responsible for that information, then you're in big trouble if it's not correct. So you need to make sure things are correct. So I think this is the type of guidance that students need to understand. I don't know if I've got sound on this. I think we're going to run short on time. Have I got sound? Welcome. Oh, we do. So I'll give you a quick view of some sort of language sort of accessibility and transformation within these tools. So this is Notebook LM. Put your hands up if you've seen Notebook LM before. People. Okay. So Notebook LM works the same. If you see the chat interface here, it's the same kind of as ChatGPT. The difference is that it only works with information you upload to it. It's actually quite useful for students. So you upload PDFs, journal articles, you can upload YouTube videos, then you ask it questions. It will only ever refer to that information that you've uploaded. But the other thing that you can do is you have all these tools on the side to help with learning. And one of them is an audio overview. And it basically generates a podcast. So what you're going to hear are completely AI generated voices. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into language itself, specifically that often confusing difference between code switching and translanguaging. Right, we hear both terms thrown around.
Sometimes interchangeable. Exactly. People use them to describe mixing languages, but our sources suggest the differences are profound.
So all AI generated. And if I was teaching students about this, sorry, if I was teaching students about this, I would say to them, that's kind of like an inroad to that information, but it could misrepresent things. So use it to scaffold your learning. Listen to that while you're doing the dishes, get the information kind of an easier access way, but then go back and listen to the original, read the original of whatever you were doing. And you'll find the original easier to read at this point because you've kind of got a sense of the information, but you're also going to be reading the actual author's voice and getting all the nuances. All right, good. So that's in teaching. What about assessment? This is the thing everyone's worried about. So what are we going to do in assessment? If we want students to represent their knowledge and we mark that through, usually through writing, because it's logistically, it's easier. It's what we've done for a long, long time. What do we do? So the problem is, what I found in my teaching was that students were so focused on creating this final, polished, like grammatically and lexically, like fancy looking writing essay, that they would skip all of that intellectual process at the beginning. They wouldn't even worry about that because they saw I was marking this end product, and now there's a machine that can create that end product like in 30 seconds. So I was thinking about my assessment. Although I was literally having to teach them language, I was teaching them academic English. I was rethinking what's the important thing to teach now because these tools are out there. They're going to use them. I'm not going to kid myself. I'm going to be realistic. Half of teaching academic English is teaching academic skills. So I thought, okay, they're not concentrating on that. I'm going to create an assessment that the backwash, that the effect of it going to the course leading up to it is that they focus more on these skills. And so, yeah, so we too often we're assessing the language policy. We should be assessing the intellectual work. So I thought about the validity of my assessment. So here's just this is a infographic I would show my students to be like, okay, in these first steps, you don't even need to use sentences. Don't worry about your grammar. You're just taking notes. You're just developing your ideas, your topics, your reading, your synthesizing. All of that bit, I think, is the bit where you're developing your ideas. When you get to write your draft, you're writing in full sentences. That's when you have to worry about the grammar. But they would just focus on this last bit. I wanted them to focus on that whole like 2/3 of what I thought was more important. So I redesigned my assessment. I made this assessment. It's got basically kind of two phases and then a third part. So the first part was I wanted their ideas. I wanted what they thought, but I wanted that to be digitally unassisted because I don't want AI's thoughts. I want theirs. So this was in exam conditions. I thought exam conditions, sit down, pen and paper, give you an unseen question on a topic we've been talking about for the whole term. So you've got some ideas about it. And then you just write down what you think. No sentences allowed, I told them, just bullet points. Write that down, get it all out, your ideas. And this isn't marked. So lower stakes, should be less stressful for an exam, but I just want to see your ideas. They take that, I keep a copy of that, so I've got a record of it. They take it home. And then phase two is AI assisted refinement. No restrictions. I know I can't restrict it. I can't detect it. Use anything they want. And also leading up to that in the term, we also had some lessons on how to use AI to give you feedback, to help with your language, but these had to be based on their ideas and they had to find new sources to integrate as well. And then so I marked that final version. And for me, this also represented a more authentic writing process that people are going to be using. And then they handed that in with some reflective questions about how they used AI, what they did. So the outcomes were improved validity. I was testing the thing I wanted to test. I wasn't testing their language. I was testing their ideas. It matched like what their levels were. I was a bit worried because I thought they could go off and just ask ChatGPT to write an essay outline and that would be it. Like everyone would get 100%. But no, if they hadn't engaged in that course about how to write thesis statements and how to write arguments, they couldn't even do it with AI. And it reduced the misconduct. So the term before, we'd have a full 50% of the cohort reported for academic misconduct using AI. This time we had 2 people because they copied off each other in the exam bit. And then also, if they did, the only way they could use AI unfairly or badly was use it to write the answers to their reflective questions, which some of them did. But that was basically this one just built into the rubric. So their reflection on their AI tools. If they had a really insightful reflection that was, showed me how they got from that original to the final version, then they got a better mark. So if they used AI to write those answers to those questions, it was just like it was surface level. It was just built into the marking system. So again, they didn't have to worry about the academic misconduct. So what did I assess? I assessed their argument qualities, their evidence use, their critical evaluation of the AI suggestions. They had to tell me what went wrong as well, and their own metacognitive reflection. So it was a much better assessment in the end. And it was just through me thinking about, I want their ideas. Their language isn't necessarily their ideas. I need to find a way to separate those somehow. So what have we been getting wrong? What do we need to rethink in our own context? So this is one of the definitions of plagiarism in university. This was presenting work or ideas from another source as your own. So any source without consent of the original author, incorporating it into your work without full acknowledgement. This is what we're telling students. This is what students have to abide by, because it also says any use of material generated wholly or in part through the use of artificial intelligence. So this is what we're telling students. If this applied to, I would hope this would apply to everyone, but if it does, I'm committing plagiarism every day because I use AI to help with my writing all the time. So do most of the people that I work with, so do most of the people we train. I don't see anyone citing it or saying that they're, that's what they're doing. I think this is just part of it. It's come from a source, so it's come from another source. There is another web page with a definition of plagiarism from the postgraduate one. This one says copying or paraphrasing other people's work or ideas, not another source. I think this one is better because we don't want to be using other people's ideas because it's their ideas. But using AI for language help, but they're your ideas, I think is a different thing if we're thinking about plagiarism. And I quite like this example from Sarah Elaine Eaton. She's at the University of Calgary. And you can see the original version of this comes from 2021. So it was pre-ChatGPT. So she was already thinking about this then. This updated version was 2023. But she's got a bunch of different, thoughts here. Hybrid human AI writing will become normal. It already is. That's happening, definitely. Human creativity is enhanced. So you can use it to, it's not just a tool you get to do something for you. You can work with it to help with your creativity. Language barriers disappear. She was already talking about that. You're using it for translation, for the things that people are using it for in the writing process. Humans can relinquish control, maybe, of some things, but not responsibility. So this is what we train students. This is what we train staff with. You're responsible for anything that you use from AI and that you're submitting to anywhere. It's still your responsibility, and the attribution of that remains important. And historical definitions of plagiarism no longer apply. So she was saying that back then. We need to rethink the ideas of plagiarism. So, and also I think traditional authorship, I think this is more of a question of authorship as well. What does authorship mean? It was always collaborative. You have editors, you have tutor feedback, you have writing centers to help, you have translators. So I think about this as well in terms of translation. If you have a book, a novel you've written in English, so if you get a French translation of that novel, the translator gets credit for it because they're a person doing work, but we still see that intellectual contribution, those ideas as the original authors. We have grammar checkers, speech to text. So there's a bunch of different ways that we've had assistance with language with writing. The change has been the power of the language tool. So obviously generative AI can create language and a lot more than we've had in the past. But what shouldn't change is who creates and owns their ideas. This is why I think it's better used for language, for writing work, than for generating ideas and information. So we're trying to police at the moment authorship boundaries. So did you use AI rather than how did you use it? And I think that's a very, very important distinction that we don't address necessarily with our students. We're trying to detect it. Did you use it at all? Yes, therefore, it's not that you've cheated. But how they've used it is really important. So I think we need to design assessments that show us that. And so also we can teach students how to use it well, because you can tell them don't use it at all, but then you're not teaching them how to use it. And they need to know that for the world that they're going into. So, and the linguistic access to it. So the linguistic accessibility affordances of generative AI are huge. So for people like me, with ADHD, people with other neurodivergent conditions, or just barriers to writing, which may be physical, maybe visually impaired, and people who are linguistically stigmatized, so speak languages that aren't English, like I said, or stigmatized varieties of English. So there's a lot of different ways that by bringing it in can actually help people. So we should stop asking, did they write every word themselves? Because that's not necessarily a representation of their ideas. You might get worse ideas from them because you're expecting them to write in this certain particular way that feels unnatural for them. But if we start asking, can they defend every idea as their own? That's a more important thing to be trying to assess when we're trying to provide evidence of them having learned. So I think we should keep humans where we're strongest, which is in the ideas, the creativity, the information that should be coming from humans. Put LLMs, put large language models where they're strongest, and that's in the language work. And I think I finished right on time then. So Thank you very much. I do have one sort of accessibility request down here, which is for asking one question at a time and with concise explanations, because my ADHD brain will focus on the first thing you say and I'll have an answer and I'll want to say it. And if you keep going, I'll probably just interrupt you. Thank you. Now, we have a roving mic up the back there, so if you have any questions, I'll point you out. One down here. Oh, I'll come back to you. Sorry, I wasn't sure whether you had your hand up or not.
Hello, thank you for that session. My name is Manjiri. I am Indian. My first language is English because I started learning it when I was 4 years old, and I was very fortunate to go to a very good school. Though I speak two more languages and write in them, English is still my first language.
Yeah.
But my question is not about me. I know you said I have to keep it short. My question is about the people I work with. And the people I work with are all people with disabilities.
Yeah.
And English is their fourth language or third language.
Yeah.
And disability is not the concern, it's really the language.
Yeah.
It's everything you said. And my question to you is really looking for advice on how we can use what they don't know better. Because what they've started doing now and are doing rather well is suddenly I see great emails written.
Yeah.
When if you speak to them, you really know that this is not their email. And so how is it that we can help them know what is all right, what is not all right? When is it that they can use these tools and when not? Because right now they don't know and they're freely using them because they're free.
I think any of the things that we discuss in these rooms like this that I'm telling you now are the things we need to tell students. You know, say, oh, you shouldn't be using ChatGPT for this because it's bad. Okay, don't just talk about it among us. That's the things we need to be telling the students. So I did the same thing in my classes. I thought, like I said, it got released. I thought, oh God, should I tell them about it? Well, yes, because they need someone to guide them. So one of the first kind of tools I came across was something called Chat PDF. And that was you upload a PDF and you can chat with it. You just do that in ChatGPT now. So that tool has died. But I was like, oh, should I tell them about that? Because then are they going to read anymore? And I thought, well, they're going to find out about it anyway. So I better well. So then I designed a lesson. So I think we can design our lessons around it and show them what the appropriate kind of, what it means to know things, what it means to develop skills. And so what I did is I had an academic reading group with them. I gave them a journal article. They went away and they had to read this journal article, find certain bits of information in it. And the point was they had to find out which parts of that journal article are the most like useful ones, like the abstract is useful, the conclusion is useful, no one really reads the methodology, that type of thing. And so we did that and then we discussed it and then I said to them, okay, so you've kind of found the information you wanted. What else, what other skills did you learn when you were doing this? And so we went through, we learned about vocabulary because we were like reading something, we learned about genre, we learned about the structure of an article, all these things you need to know that you still need to know. You haven't mentioned ChatGPT yet, but you still need to know those things even if you are using ChatGPT. And then a bunch of other things. So we wrote them all up on the board. And then, they hadn't seen it before, but I brought up Chat PDF myself. And I was like, this tool exists now. You can put up this journal article into it. And I put the questions I'd asked them and it just got the information like that. Not only that, you could ask it in Nepali. And it will respond to you in Nepali. So you can do it in your first language. But then I brought them back. I'm like, these skills, which of these skills are you not developing when you do it that way? So I think part of it is recognizing that our students are adults. They're going to go out. They're going to make their own decisions. I think the onus is on us to help them, to guide them to make those decisions in a good way. So yeah, with those students, I think, yeah, just discussing that with them. Like, what are you doing when you write this email? What are you trying to achieve? What gets lost if you're not doing it in your own, like, voice? Maybe there are reasons why it might look fancier, but the person who you're writing to, one of the things you have to consider when you're a writer is the view of the reader that it's going to. You have to put yourself in their shoes and what they think. So that's just a normal part, I think, of teaching writing skills. And so you just have this extra layer now of having to teach them. If you use ChatGPT and it kind of looks like ChatGPT, you know, you need to be able to adjust it enough that people aren't going to judge you when you send them an email. Oh, done. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your approach, and I do believe strongly that ideas are more important, right? And my question is about lower plagiarism risk. So if I'm writing totally completely my ideas,
Yeah.
and I ask ChatGPT to convert them in proper academic language,
Yeah.
it may use some formulaic phrases, right?
Yeah.
And as soon as I'm aware, like detection mechanism to detect was AI used or not, based on language, on phrases, not on ideas. So it could be detected as, oh, you were using AI, you were wrong.
Yeah.
But I was using it as you explained, just for translation.
So there's two things to know about. So I'm just going to go with Turnitin because that's what we use. Turnitin traditionally does like the matching of exact language because it's statistically unlikely people are going to use exactly the same phrasing at the same time. So, and it will give you a percentage because sometimes there are like, there are a percentage that will cross over. In terms of formulaic language, we know that academic language is formulaic. There's a website that exists that is called the Manchester Academic Phrase Bank, where you take formulaic phrases to put into to teach people how to write. So we do expect academic language to be formulaic to a certain extent. The AI detection tool in Turnitin works differently. That is looking at statistically how the language kind of seems and then deciding whether it's AI or not. Thankfully, we don't have that turned on in the university, and I don't think we will. And there are no AI detection tools endorsed in the university, so they shouldn't be detecting AI like that anyway. The only way to detect it is like that exact matching, which I think even the traditional like Turnitin is probably not very useful anymore because people can get around that very easily with paraphrasing using ChatGPT now anyway. But yeah, so academic language is supposed to be formulaic. I think if someone comes to you and says your language is too formulaic because it seems like AI, my recommendation is that's what we should not be doing in the first place. We shouldn't be trying to catch people out using AI because it can help them with their language. We need to find ways to give evidence of their learning, which is not based on just that end writing bit, which is what I did.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm interested in your approach to using AI in learning. If so, how do you approach them including? Thank you.
It depends on what your field is. So for me, I think the linguistic accessibility angle is academic writing and information can be very hard to read. And, we say academic writing is meant to be clear. We write academically, we use a certain style of language because it's clear. I'm like, is it though? I will show that to my students. I'll be like, here's a paragraph of academic language. Is that clear? Do you understand it? No, because it's not. It depends on the person writing. But clarity is in the eye of the beholder. So we can say to students, therefore, use some AI to either change it into a podcast, simplify the language so you can get the information out. It can give them accessibility in terms of how they prefer to hear about the information. They can personalize it. So I've done a demonstration before where I showed, ChatGPT, explain to me what photosynthesis is. It did that. Now explain it to me like I'm an undergraduate. It did that. It's come up with some analogy. Explain it to me like I'm 11 years old. It come up with a different analogy. So it's very good at that kind of like keeping the idea, that core information, but adjusting the form of it. So teaching students how to do that, it's a good idea. But also at the same time, teaching students that you can't do just that. You can't take that shortcut all the time. You still need to go that extra step and still learn the more complicated language, because when it comes time to write something for yourself, even if you're getting ChatGPT to help you, you see the output, you need to be able to evaluate that output and know whether it's doing what you need. So I think it's kind of recognizing both the capabilities of the tools, which are often a lot more than people realize. So you need to be informed about them, but also recognizing what new workflows are going to be like, what new writing processes are going to be like. You can't help students and guide them with that if we don't know the tools ourselves and we don't know how these writing processes could possibly work.
Hi, thank you very much. It's a very loud voice myself. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'd like to ask you something about reading. I know you're focusing on writing, but the start of your writing process is about ideas and ideas generation. And for me, that's the bigger issue is where do ideas come from a young student, a first year undergraduate, new into their discipline? And for me, the bigger issue is AI's impact on reading.
Yeah.
And how do students develop their knowledge domain and their ability to self-evaluate their ideas if they're not engaging with reading?
Yeah.
So could you speak more on how, or do we ask them to avoid AI in reading? How do they?
I think again, I think it's like nuanced. So it can again give you those access to things that are hard to read, make it a bit easier. But then making them aware that easier isn't always better for your skill development. So you do need to be reading deeply. You need to understand things. They can access information in, like, you can upload some not only the podcast, but get like a reader that can read it to you. But I was thinking, so when I was teaching academic English, ChatGPT dropped, and I thought to myself, well, we've got the 4 skills: writing, reading, speaking, listening. Writing has always, in academic English teaching, been the top skill. We spend so much time on that, so much time. And I thought to myself, within like 6 months, I think that's dropped to the bottom. It's still important. I'm not saying it's not important, but speaking needs to be spontaneous. There is like the technology is developing for like simultaneous translation, but overall you still need to speak to people spontaneously. You need to be able, and that's difficult to learn. And we don't do a lot of it in class because we spend so much time on writing, which is very solitary for the most part, that we don't speak to each other a lot in the classes. Listening still needs to be spontaneous. So I thought this is actually like a bonus. Now I've got more time in my classes to spend on the speaking and the listening, not so much on the writing. But also the reading was still important because, like I said, you need to read the output and be able to know whether it says what you need it to say. So I would say to them, reading maybe is even more important than the writing. That's like, no one ever taught me academic English. I learned academic English just by reading things and mimicking it. Like that's how people who are first language speakers of English usually learn their academic English just by reading it. But if you're interacting with a chatbot and it's speaking to you in standard English, then you are doing some reading. So yeah, I think again, it's just breaking that down for students to understand the nuances of it. The things that we think, oh, they shouldn't be using it for this or that because of these reasons. Tell the students. Yeah. It's getting very late. Great. There's no other questions. We can wrap up here. I'll stay around for a little while so to have a chat if anyone wants. I don't know when we're getting kicked out. When are we getting kicked out? All right. Thank you.